Hey guys, it's Shay with Shay's Urban Edibles. Today I wanted to take you guys along for garden to table pesto, two different ways. Come along. Let's see. So first we'll have to start by collecting some of the ingredients that I'll be using in the pesto. Two of those ingredients are out here in the garden, and that is this Malabar spinach that I'll be adding in addition to the basil that's all around the garden. So I'm going to collect some of this and we'll go from there. This Malabar spinach is way overdue for collecting. So this Malabar spinach is way past due for collecting. It's kind of just been over here growing and growing and growing. I haven't fertilized it. I've barely been watering it, but it still wants to grow. And so I'm gonna use some of it today. I know one thing, and this is definitely gonna be a staple in my garden because it grows, it's beautiful, it's easy to care for. You can make salads, you can make pesto. Ouch. Let me get my spray. All right, I'm back with you guys. I haven't been out here a good 10 minutes doing this video, and the mosquitoes are already eating my ankles alive. This should be easy to clean too, because one thing, it just rained, and two, these leaves are big and they're not porous, so it doesn't look like they would hold dirt. I got a feeling this thing is probably gonna reseed over here because I know these seeds are falling down into the dirt over here. So more than likely, I'm gonna have Malabar spinach in this same place again next year. Look how big this leaf is. Look at this. It's bigger than my hand. Look at that. This thing is huge. I probably don't need to harvest much more of it since the leaves are so big. Now there are some other couple of types of spinach that I want to try. Nigerian spinach is one of those. I've grown just the regular cold weather spinach, It does well. It is delicious, but I mean, I've been eating that all my life. So why not try something different, right? So like I said, the Nigerian spinach is definitely on my list to try. And then as I go along, I'm sure I'll hear of other spinaches that I am wanting to try. Let me take a few more, and then we can move on to the basil. Take these two back here. Oh, doggone it. All right, so I think that's enough spinach for now. We can move on to the basil. From there, let's go this way. I'm going to harvest that small basil right there in hopes that it will grow back this year. And then I have, this one's already gone to flower, and it tends to be a little spicier once it goes to flower, and so I'm not going to use these basils that have seeds on them. There is another basil over here in the bed with the corn, and so I'll be collecting basil from there. I will also be collecting some of this basil here. Let's see. Just in case, I'm going to pick a couple more. Now that we have all of the basil and all of the spinach, we can get started on our pestos. All right, we gathered all the ingredients. Now we just need to get them washed going to start with the basil because it has to be picked individually off of the plant. You don't want the stems in there, you only want the leaves. And so it's important that you remove your basil from your stem. I don't know about you guys, but I'm always in the mood for pasta, and so this pesto will probably not take me very far. I'll need to make a few more batches before the basil gives up the ghost, and I'll end up storing it in the freezer for later use. Now you can freeze it, but when you freeze it, what you want to do is you want to make sure you use the jars that don't have corners on the end. So if the jar is straight up, that's the best type of jar to use. That way you don't have to worry about it freezing, expanding, and then busting the jar. I normally just use Genovese basil in my pesto. I've never tried any other basils. If you have, I'd appreciate it if you could leave it in the comments of the video that you've used a different type of basil and what kind of basil you used, because I'd like to give it a try. I don't know, maybe lemon basil would be a good choice. Especially if you're going to put this over shrimp and pasta, you know? Sprinkle a little bit of salt in there. I need to put my apron on. I'm just wet. See that little worm in there? Which is why it's really good to use salt. I don't want that little sucker to sting me. Hey, where'd he go? Oh, there he is. Yeah. See why it's important to maybe use a little salt? This little sucker was inching in my basil. Let me watch it a little more. Love the sink. Drop that basil in there. Add some more salt. Although basil is supposed to repel pests from tomatoes and other vegetables, it still has some pests, I guess, that are attracted to it, like that little green worm that we just saw. And so you still, like I said, you want to make sure you wash your veggies thoroughly, even if they are coming out of your home garden, because, I mean, it's still a part of nature. It's still out there, so. Now, basil is one of those easily bruised herbs that I was talking about on another video. But this basil just don't have to be bruised today because I'm not trying to eat no worms. Alright, so next I'm going to wash the spinach. I've already poured salt on it. I need a bowl to put it in after I wash it. This is probably the most cumbersome part of making pesto. It's a really simple process, but making sure your veggies are clean and there's no bugs on them. It's probably, like I said, it's the most cumbersome part of it, washing the veggies. But that's with anything that you cook. You gotta wash it, you gotta peel it. And because these leaves are so big, I do plan on cutting them up a little bit before I put them in the food processor. I did see very minimal pest pressure on these, and so I don't think we'll have to worry about bugs on the spinach. still want to give it a good wash though. All right, we got our spinach washed. We have our basil washed. We've got the garlic. We need to prepare it. Each batch of pesto requires 1 tablespoon of garlic, which could probably be maybe a clove or 2. And so what I'm going to do is, because I plan on making 2 different batches, I'm going to peel 4, possible 5 of these garlics. Now, you can use the garlic that comes in the jar that's already cut up or minced, but I'm not going to use that garlic. I'm going to use fresh garlic. I feel like it tastes better. But it's up to you which one you want to use in your recipe. If you want something that's a little easier, go ahead and use your minced garlic that comes in the jar. But I think you should get the one that comes in oil, not the one that's minced in water, because you don't want any separation to occur in your pesto, because your pesto has olive oil in it. You don't want to add water to the pesto any more than you already do when you add your washed vegetables, you know. All right, so I got 5 cloves of garlic here. All right, everything's ready to go. All we need to do now is start adding the ingredients. Here I will be adding 1 cup of basil and 1 cup of spinach. All right, I did say that I will be cutting my spinach up a little bit prior to adding it to the food processor, and so I do want to go ahead and cut some of this spinach up. It'll be easier to put it in a cup. Then forcing these huge leaves down. It'll also help the food processor break it down a little better. All right, so that's right at 1 cup. I think I'm probably gonna add, there, that's enough to make sure it's exactly 1 cup. 5 more to be on the safe side. All right, so we got our 1 cup of spinach. I'm gonna add that to the food processor. Next is going to be our 1 cup of basil. A little more. All right, that's our 1 cup of basil. Add that to the food processor. top on. Post it. All right, I need to add a little bit of the olive oil. Half a cup of olive oil. Where are we at on that? All right, it's right at half a cup. I'm going to add a little bit in here to help it mix better. That's better. From there, I can add in my garlic. And that's my 2 garlics. I think I'd like to add one half of another garlic. I'm gonna can put a dash of salt in there. It says a 1/4 teaspoon on the recipe. I think that'll help bring some of the liquids out of it. We got our olive oil already measured out. We've got our walnuts, which we need, or pine nuts. Pine nuts tend to be a little more expensive, and so I did a combination of pine nuts and walnuts combined. And you need 1/3 cup of pine nuts or walnuts. So I'm going to mix the two. Some pine nuts, some walnuts. Here's my 1/3 cup right here. Let me take this off. I think the last thing that we'll be adding is the olive oil and the salt and pepper. Well, the pepper, we already added the salt. All right, that's the 1/3. Add this. Uh-oh, I don't want to waste my walnuts. Alright, that's a 1/3 cup. Add that in there. We'll pulse this. And we'll use 1/2 cup of the Parmesan cheese. Now it doesn't have to necessarily be Parmesan. It could be Romano. It could be any other, maybe feta, but it definitely will need to be a drier cheese. cup. No, I do not have gloves on. I'm cooking for my home. I am not cooking for the public. All right, there's my half a cup of cheese. I may go back and add more later. The looks like it's nice and blended. We will toast while we pour the olive oil. Oh, it won't go without that top on there. I forgot. Mixing in very well. Get my spatula and push that in. Nice and creamy. A little bit of black pepper. And that should do it. Alright folks, there it is, nice and creamy pesto. This would go good, like I said, over pasta. You could use shrimp, you could use chicken, you could add it to maybe a steak. It would probably be really tasty on a steak. Maybe even fish too. Pulse it one more time. I'll transfer it to what it's going to sit in until I get ready to use it. And then we'll get started on the next one. These are some Bama Mama jars. They don't have shoulders on them. And this is what I'll be using to freeze my pesto. I do want to leave a little bit of room in there for it to expand. These got to be washed. This one won't be quite as full, but what I may do is end up putting even amounts in both of them. So now we can move on to the next recipe. It consists of basil and also sun-dried tomatoes. I'm going to go ahead and pour my 1/3 cup of oil before we even get started. This is the 1/3 cup. Half a cup. I'm sorry. Alright, we got our half cup of olive oil set aside. This process will go a lot quicker, guys, because everything is already cut up. I want to go ahead and add in 1 cup of basil, which is probably going to be the remaining amount of basil. Now the sun-dried tomatoes is an ingredient that will be added to make this pesto a little different. So with the sun-dried tomatoes, you want to add half a cup. That's your half a cup of tomatoes. Let me get my spinach and my garlic. All right, and we've got our 1 cup of spinach. Let's blend it a little bit. Like to go ahead and add in the garlic. And toss it a little bit more. Half a cup of cheese comes next. Third cup of pine nuts and walnuts mixed, or you can just use all walnuts, or you can use all pine nuts. It's up to your budget. That's a heaping third cup. Let's pause for a little bit. Oh my goodness, those sun-dried tomatoes smell so good. I'm going to push it down a little bit like I did the other batch. Add some salt and pepper. right, now that we've blended all of the other stuff, we can go ahead and start adding the oil. That's last, and you want it to be blending while you're pouring the oil. Push the sides down a little bit. Make sure everything gets blended in there. A little more oil. Voila, nice and creamy. I'm gonna post it a little bit more and then I'll add it to my jars. Keep in mind, folks, this recipe does have the sun-dried tomatoes in it, and so it may not be as smooth as the recipe without the sun-dried tomatoes. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. It's just not going to be as smooth. If you prefer a smoother, creamier pesto, then you probably want to just make it the original way. So like I said, these will go into the freezer until I'm ready to use them. Alright folks, I appreciate you guys for joining me as usual. If you found my content interesting, I'd appreciate it if you could like, share, and subscribe. Also leave a comment on whether or not you use something other than Genovese basil in your pesto. If so, I'd like to give it a try myself. Like I said, I was thinking maybe lemon basil would be good. But these are my two ways of making pesto. In the meantime, I'll see you on the next video. Bye.